Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to give everybody a quick second to get settled in. And while you guys are getting ready for this presentation of attitudes in the workplace, please go ahead and take note of your hotline number. A huge thank you to the Central Valley HR Hotline for sponsoring this for all you local businesses. We have numbers up here for each county. You can give us a call Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and our HR directors are always on call during those times to answer your HR compliance questions. This is a wonderful, wonderful resource. I am biased, but I think you can get all your questions answered about employee handbooks, hiring, firing, all that good stuff. And these will also be included in the handouts that will be sent out to you after the presentation. So if you can't write down these numbers right now, you will still get a copy of it later. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Neely, the Marketing Director here at California Employers Association, and you are going to be seeing a presentation on attitude in the workplace sponsored by the Central Valley HR Hotline. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin today's webinar, we have a few housekeeping details to go over. You will be muted throughout the presentation, so that means you can hear us, but we can't hear you and you can't hear each other. Please put your questions in the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Please hold your questions until the end. You might find that your questions get answered throughout the presentation, and we will hold time at the end to answer any additional questions that you might have. Your speaker today is Ms. Jessica Rivera. Take it away, Jessica.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Attitude Makes a Difference. We are thrilled to have you with us today. And as Stephanie said, we will make time for questions following the presentation for anything that may come up. And chances are, if you have a question, I may cover it during the presentation, but if not, jot it down and we will answer it for you at the end of the presentation. Just a reminder who we are. We're California Employers Association. We work with employers throughout the state of California, and we provide peace of mind when it comes to human resources, services, and solutions for the state of California, and again, for our California employers. Things change in California, laws and regulations. And as Stephanie mentioned, we have human resource subject matter experts on our team who are able and willing and available to support you in your questions you may have. Also, wanted to mention, we have to say this because our attorneys make us say this. We aren't attorneys. We provide guidance. And if you have a need for any legal advice when it comes to anything regarding human resources, we will always let you know that we recommend you talk to your legal counsel, or we recommend you do talk to your legal counsel if that comes up. So we provide guidance, not legal advice. With that in mind, let's talk for a moment about what we'll be discussing today. We're going to talk about how to recognize those characteristics of a bad attitude and a 5-step process when it comes to dealing with difficult people. We all do it. I mean, it's the world we live in. We're all humans. We all go through things in our lives, and sometimes we behave in ways that we're not proud of. And how do we deal with that as leaders, as team leaders, as colleagues in the workplace? Also, the importance of our own self-awareness and making sure we put ourselves in check if we find ourselves going into a situation with a less than good attitude about it. And lastly, how to gain and maintain that positive attitude. We'll spend some time and tips on that also. Question for all of you, and feel free to jot things in the chat box for your colleagues to see as we're going through this presentation. How do you act around people with bad attitudes? Do you avoid them at all costs? I know in the past when I've worked with people who have bad attitudes and they don't seem to want to help themselves, I'll walk around where they are. I don't even want to entertain it because I've already had conversations with them. And if they want to stay in that place, I don't have to subject myself to it all of the time. So asking ourselves that question, how do we behave with it? Everyone has bad days. We know that, even we do. And sometimes our employees have bad weeks and yes, some bad months. Some managers may be frustrated, when employees blow off steam, yet in today's world, it happens. So how do we behave? What are some things we can do to make the workplace better versus letting it disrupt us to the point that we feel that there's nothing we can do? And also important to remember, even the most positive employees and your most productive employees and your top talent, your highly talented employees, they're bound to break down when they're forced to work with, really negative peers. So we have to keep in mind our teammates too and our teams because they do have an impact on others. So when we think about people and describing people with bad attitudes, what do they say? What do they do? How do they behave? How do they sound? Let's take a quick look. When we see people with negative attitudes, these are some of the things that we observe. An I can't versus I can attitude. They tend to stay in blame, or they'll stay in a problem and not work towards a solution. The blame game, again, we see that. Many times they will not take responsibility for their own actions. And they look at what's not there, what they're lacking, and they don't see possibilities. Versus on the other side, we see all of these things that are the opposite of what we see with the negative attitude. And yes, it's true. Some people they filter the world through a filter of optimism. Some of us, if some of you are familiar with Strengths Finders, that is considered a talent. Some of us have positivity as a talent, and that allows us to see the world still based in reality, but with the glass half full versus half empty. While others have that filter of pessimism, and we know who they are. We've worked with them before. And as we think about the people that we work with and we think about ourselves, these are some of the things to keep in mind. And also when we have conversations, coaching conversations with our direct reports, our colleagues, or when people come to us and ask us what we would do if we were dealing with that situation. So how do they affect people? How do bad attitudes affect others? We know for a fact our coworkers, we've all been there. And yes, maybe there were times that we had bad attitudes about something. It can happen during change, when we're going through change in an organization. It can happen when we're short-staffed, workload is heavy. Yet they affect coworkers. They affect the people sitting next to us, people in our team, in our department. Customers know when they're working with someone who has a bad attitude. And what's important about this is that many times customers, they may decide, I'm not going to do business with that company anymore. If they don't have people who want to serve us for what we're paying them to do, I don't know that I want to do business with them anymore. And some of us, we won't even know a customer's not going to work with us anymore. And so it's important to realize that employees with bad attitudes have an impact to a lot of people. Also, the culture and the work environment. We want to make sure that we address it as soon as possible. And there are reasons why people do have bad attitudes, as I mentioned. They may not like their job. They may not like the work environment. They may not like the people they work with, or they feel dissatisfied with the company. But the fact of the matter is that when people come in with that type of an attitude, or they have it, or it's been developed, it is going to have an impact on your team and in many times your company. Also, how it impacts the work, right? Mistakes, less productivity. I mean, it's incredible when you look at some numbers with some of your top performers. Their productivity is 400 times more than someone with a bad attitude. So this is why it's so important, and we don't want to lose employees. Right now, it's tough to hire good employees and keep them. So we don't want others who have that attitude to impact those good employees. We don't want to lose customers, and we don't want to lose employees. Is it contagious? One of my favorite quotes is one that Oprah had many, many years ago. And she would say, We are responsible for the energy we bring into a room. People feel it, they sense it, and it can have an impact on the dynamics in that room and how people interact. And many times it can have an impact on your culture too, your work culture. So we don't want to be around someone who's constantly talking about how terrible everything else is, because our engagement, our happiness, our contentment at work really links to productivity. And we as managers, as leaders, want to do everything we can to extinguish those negative attitudes as quickly as they can. So we have to be proactive to nip this in the bud. I was recently at an event with my own daughter, and it was a happy event. And she has a neighbor who tends to be on the negative side. And when we got to the event, the minute that my daughter and I approached this neighbor, she goes right into a litany of all the things that are wrong with her child, her husband, her neighborhood. And we hadn't even had a chance to even ask, how are you doing or anything. She went right into that whole litany. And then she couldn't understand why people didn't want her around. And my daughter and I were shaking our heads afterwards and saying, we don't think she even realized how she comes across. So it's important to nip it in the bud as much as we can, because it is contagious and it brings people down. When we're working with our employees and we are talking with them about their attitude, if you have employees who are starting to have that negative attitude, that negativity, we don't want to call it a negative attitude. We want to focus on behavior. We always want to focus as much as we can on the problem, on the behavior, and we don't want to personally attack the person, because a conversation won't go well when we do that. So let's look at some of these things that might come into play when we talk to an employee that may be having some issues. We want to talk with them about, for example, if we're talking about their relationships, we can say something like, I don't see you building and maintaining positive team relationships. Your communications are often perceived as disruptive or disrespectful. And then again, we're talking about the behavior, not the person. And it's important to talk about that with them. Another one may be when someone brings something up in a staff meeting and they're being disrespectful, or they're saying something, or they're just not part of the team. It's important to talk about when you roll your eyes or you sigh heavily in disgust, people feel that and they feel that they are being disrespected. So important to address that and to talk about the actual behavior versus the person. So 5 steps for dealing with someone with a bad attitude. And this can be extremely helpful as you reflect upon this, and you will get copies of all of these handouts, asking yourself some questions as you go through this. So as you take a look, you want to determine your involvement, understand the other person, hopefully influence their attitude in a good way, resolve the problem, recover, and go on. So let's take a look. The first one is determine your involvement. And as you look at these 4 questions, ask yourself these 4 questions. If you answer no to any of them, consider, is it even worth your time to get involved in this situation? Because many times, we have that choice to make that decision. Do I even want to bother with this? Do I even want to engage with this? Or is it even going to be important to me in the future? Now, obviously, if it's one of our employees, one of our direct reports, one of our colleagues, we have to absolutely say, we're going to be working with these people for a long time. So is this person important to you? Who are the people or relationships that are important to you? And as we look at this, if it's someone that you don't interact with on a regular basis, if you happen to get maybe subpar service from someone on the phone when you're calling to inquire about a bill or about a product, or if you get it from someone and you go to one store one time in 10 years, it's not really that important to you. It's not worth you getting your cortisol levels increased because they frustrated you. Yet if it is someone who's important to you, Absolutely, we have to take a look at that. Also, who else might be affected? If I'm at work and I see someone has a bad attitude or they're just alienating coworkers, especially customers and coworkers, or they're just really going over the edge, we probably need to talk to someone else too, and maybe get our HR department involved. As a leader, I encourage you, use your HR resources, human resources services, because we can help you too. As part of the hotline, you can call us and we can walk you through what next steps should be. You want to still maintain that relationship with that employee, yet you also want to put them on notice if it continues, that they can't continue to have an impact on the workforce, on their team, on customers. And always don't hesitate to contact us, and also talk to your supervisor if you need to also, because they're having an impact not just on you, but on others as well. The second is try to understand what may be happening with this employee. I have worked on teams, I have led teams for many, many years, as I'm sure all of you have too. And I have found out over many years that usually the best way to approach something with someone is to ask them if they're okay. Ask them what's going on, what's happening. Again, as you talk about those behaviors and say, I noticed that you snapped at someone the other day when they asked you a question. Is everything okay? And then listen, making sure that you're really listening to what they're saying, because chances are it may be something having nothing to do with work. We all know that our personal life does flow over into our work life. Also, if we can identify something that we can fix, we want to be able to do it right away. So for example, if we have an employee who maybe isn't turning their work in on time, we can make up all kinds of reasons in our mind why they are, but if they've always been a pretty reliable employee, we want to talk with them and find out what is going on. What's causing you to have delays in getting your work done, and really identify the problem. How many times have we thought we fixed a problem, but we were just fixing a symptom and not the problem, the root cause? So making sure that we take that time, we listen, we don't assume. And yes, it can be hard sometimes when we have some employees that maybe have given us cause for concern before, yet we don't want to jump to conclusions, because we all have stuff, folks, and things can impact our attitudes. And sometimes it's just someone who cares and asks the question for people to say, gosh, I wasn't even aware that I did that. Thanks for letting me know. Yes, that sounds simple, but many times that is the case. Back to talking about their behavior. So how do we influence the other person that we're speaking with, trying to correct that bad attitude, have them change some of their behaviors in a positive way? We want to make sure they understand the impact they're having. We want to talk with them about the consequences. If they don't make the changes, not only will it impact their career, their team, the workplace, customers, but in some situations, if they don't take care of this or take actions to improve this, it really can impact their job with the company. And again, asking what's the situation, what may be happening, how can I support you as your leader? If and it does happen at times, if you have an employee that just is not a real happy employee, and it's really starting to show even more, then you really have to have some serious conversations with them, because they don't want to lose their job over it. Yet it does happen many times. As leaders, we will have employees that, gosh, because we're so desperate for good people, they know the job and I'm willing to put up with a lot of things. Yet in reality, we have to make a call. If we've done everything we can to help them, if we've brought it to their attention, if we have let them know this cannot continue, we have to make some tough calls. Again, use us as a resource when you're dealing with someone and you've done everything you think you can and you're just not getting anywhere. You've had the conversations, you've had a follow-up conversation, you're seeing no change at all. That's when you have that whole will or skill issue. If it's a skill issue, We train people, we help people, we get them to the point where they can do their job and they feel good about their work. Yet you will find, and it does happen, we see surveys about this all of the time, you have the will issue. People just, there's some people who aren't happy no matter what, and they are going to continue to behave that way. Those are the people that you can't keep because it's costing you a lot more than just your energy in terms of your employee morale and your customers. So as you're trying to influence this attitude too, and you're talking to this person, you've talked about the consequences. What are other ways to think about this? And another thing to consider too is sometimes we're misplaced in a job. It's important for us to be able to play to our strengths, what we do well. Some of us, if we were put in a certain spot at the company, even short term, it's going to be a stretch for us because it doesn't play to our core strengths. And we can do anything for a short time, but if it's much longer than that, you will see people's attitudes start to get affected. And you want to put people in the best places where they can be successful. And we can only know that by talking with them, coaching them, and leading them. So as we talk with our employees and as we let them know the impact of their behavior, it's extremely important to be clear about what we expect to see, how this has that the fact that this has to be resolved, and we have to talk with them about what your future expectations are. And many times our expectations as leaders are, I want you to be professional and courteous to our customers at all times. If we have to do a script, let's do a script. I want you to be responsive to your emails and communications to your coworkers. They shouldn't have to wait days to get a response from you. I want you to promptly return the phone calls within X amount of time when we get calls into our office, but making sure that we do take that time to define what we expect from them. And also talking about solutions. They may come up with something that's even better than what you're thinking about too. So taking that time to talk with them about what they think they might be able to do also. And again, we have to tell people sometimes too, when you do bring your personal, if they are having personal issues, and sometimes personal issues last for a while, and we get it, we're human, we all go through it. But we have to make them aware that, when you bring your personal issues to work, it makes others uncomfortable and it distracts them from their job duties. And we can handle anything one off, and we get it. We're empathetic leaders. We care about our people. But when it's continuing and continuing, there may be other things that this employee needs to do to help them get to a place where they can be a good influence at work and not distract other workers. And then agree on the best solution. I've had employees sometimes that are going through really difficult times. And, at times the best solution is to remove themselves from work for a while, to take a leave, to take some vacation time, to just get away from the situation so they can work on their problems. And I've had these conversations time and time again over the years with my employees, and they feel bad about having to do it. But if you don't pay attention to the things that are important, it's going to roll over into your work life. So as we talk with our employees and we coach them, and we want to keep the coaching very direct and constructive, it's important for us also as leaders to model the professionalism we expect to see from our employees. So important. And as hard as it can be sometimes, you're going to get some emotional employees when you're talking to them about their attitudes. There may be some manipulation, some name calling, emotional responses. And the point is not to make them feel bad about the conversation, but to have a clear conversation with them that's productive, that's about moving forward. I don't recommend staying in the blame game for a long time when it comes to having people move forward. We want to look ahead. We can't change what's happened. We can identify it. We can address the behavior, yet we want to move forward and recover. And also, you may have some employees who may get quite emotional and may cry. And I've had some leaders that are very uncomfortable with this. And the best advice I can give you when this happens is to just, for yourself, stay calm and confident, yet give them just a moment. Give them a moment to just process these emotions. I know it's hard for some of us to do this as leaders, yet we are human and many of us are going to respond differently. And I encourage you, don't put off the conversation. The sooner you can get this taken care of, the better it will be for the employee, for you as their leader, and also for the team. And a great way to start a conversation is to say something like, you may not be aware of this, and then talk about the impact. Because sometimes, again, people don't realize that they're behaving in a horrible way. And sometimes we get triggered emotionally, and it takes us to a place in our lives that we don't want to revisit. But it's important because a lot of times people don't get it, or you may bring an employee on from another company. They may be a new hire, and that kind of behavior was okay in another organization, another company, but we all have our own work cultures and how we treat each other. And if it's not okay in your workplace, we need to bring it to their attention. A big one I hear a lot that is misperceived sometimes as a bad attitude is profanity. Some people use certain words like the word the. They think it's as common as the word the, and it really isn't. So it can be also having people know that in our workplace, here's how we talk to each other, here's how we treat each other. So bringing profanity into the workplace is not acceptable here. And then again, as we recover, we go on, we're working with these people. We have to follow through on anything we've agreed to do for our employees. And we also want to recognize those baby steps. If we're seeing someone make an effort, we want to recognize that because it goes a long way in them continuing to want to do well. And sometimes it's hard for people to change, and they need our encouragement, they need our support, and they need our feedback to be able to do that. And yes, it might be something really minor that you address, but it gives them that encouragement to continue to make those changes that need to be changed. So, a couple of things as we think about uh, our work culture, our environment. It is easy to preach positivity, right? It's easy to say be positive. Well, yeah, but what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that show up in our own workplace? How does it show up for me as a leader, as a colleague in my organization? So we have to make sure that we're really genuine about that work culture and how we promote looking at the upside of things and addressing, acknowledging, recognizing those positive things that are happening. So encourage peer-to-peer recognition. That's one of the most powerful forms of recognition that we can have. When my teammate recognizes me for something, many times that's even more powerful than my leader doing it, or even someone above my leader doing that, because they see me every day. My peers see me every day. So encourage that amongst your team. It's been said, when we're aware of something, when we're looking for those opportunities to recognize someone, they appear far more frequently than we've ever seen them before, because there are a lot of opportunities to do that. Celebrate those things that are important. It can be a milestone. It can be something on a project where people are working really hard and they're frustrated because it's a hard project. Celebrating those milestones along the way are so important. And celebrate those things that are important to your folks, providing they're good with it, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary with the company. Retention is a big deal with employers right now, and acknowledging their anniversaries every year can be really helpful and make them think, gosh, my boss really knows me and they appreciate me. One thing I'll share with you that goes a long way in our own company at California Employers Association is every year, for every employee's anniversary, our president writes an email to that employee with a copy to everyone in the company. And they talk about all of that employee's contributions during the year, all the talents, the skills they bring to the workplace, and just as importantly, the impact they've had on the business, the customers, and the employees in the organization. And people look forward to that recognition from the president, because it tells employees we're important, we're valued, and we matter. We make a difference, and we all want to make a difference. Conducting those informal check-ins, right? Doing that with your folks and making sure just, hey, how are things going? How are you doing? How's things, how's the family? Many times we're going to hear about people's families and important occasions. How was that wedding? How was that birthday celebration? But doing those informal check-ins, not just when we do performance reviews, but letting them know that they're important to us. And then, of course, in the workplace, focus on that collaboration and communications. As leaders, we want to make sure that we socialize and we let people know that we're all connected, and we want to promote that collaboration. When people feel heard in the workplace, they feel that they're included, they feel they matter, and they feel that their opinion can make a difference in the work that they do. So just a quick knowledge check for you, and we'll take a moment on this. What is one thing that you should not do when dealing with a person with a bad attitude? A, determine your involvement. B, learn the facts. C, mirror their bad attitude. Or D, listen with an open mind. So take a moment. And which one do we not want to do? Let's take a look at the answer. We do not want to mirror their bad attitude. And if you have that right, congratulations, because when we mirror someone's attitude, it's a recipe for disaster. When fire meets fire, it does not end well. So we want to all do all of the other things that we've talked about, determine our involvement, learn the facts, and make that effort to listen with that open mind. We may be surprised about what we hear from our employee when we have that conversation. So congratulations if you got it right. So a little self-reflection for us. How's your attitude? Awareness of anything is so important, and our own self-awareness, that ability to focus on ourselves, our actions, our thoughts, our emotions, and see how they align with our standards is so important in today's world. Again, leaders, we're only human. We're not robots yet. And many times we have to get ourselves in a place so that we can work with people who do have those attitudes, and we're trying to influence their behavior. So the answer truly lies in being self-aware. And by having that ability to know and make those choices to control our own behavior, even when we're stressed or we're frustrated, is so important on how we impact the rest of the team's attitude too. And it's not easy. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but it is important that we do that, because again, we want to role model that behavior that we expect to see from others that we work with. So it begins with self-awareness, as I said, a good attitude, and it's critical to our development as co-workers, as professionals in a really mobile, fast-changing, and complex society. Last 3 years have given us lots of opportunities. And when we're aware, self-awareness, it allows us to be aware of our own emotions. And when we practice that, we have better control of our own actions, our behaviors. And so some things to consider: know what your triggers are. We all have triggers. There's emotional assessments, intelligence assessments we can take that will help us with those triggers. But know that we do have triggers. And I'm not saying that you should repress your emotions, but what I'm saying is you want to be able to bend and flex as things happen. Be flexible, because people are going to say and do things to you that could set you off easily if you're not aware of them and if you're not being flexible with it. Again, if we think about the very beginning when I said, am I really ever going to see this person again? Because what they're telling me is not reducing my own self-esteem or my own value. I'm never going to see them again. So I don't even need to respond. And I certainly don't need to react to this. Also, consider how your actions affect others in your company. Many times, some of us will act without thinking, and we're only going to focus on our own needs. And yes, sometimes we do. We're not proud of it, but sometimes we do. So self-awareness requires us acknowledging how we're behaving, and also how we handle those feelings of others and how our actions impact others too. I touched on this earlier. Be mindful of your strengths and your weaknesses. Folks, our greatest strengths can also be our greatest weaknesses. Some of us like to move fast, we like to get things done, and the other side of that whole strength of getting things done is we can show up as really impatient sometimes to people. And it shows in our facial expressions, the tone of our voice, our frustration, our body language. So being mindful of that and knowing, okay, I may need to slow down here a bit because I want to get this done yesterday, but they're taking a little bit longer. And your folks or your teammates may not even be being unreasonable. It may be that you're just being impatient. So being mindful of what our strengths are and how they can also turn into weaknesses goes a long way too in making the right choices with our own attitude. Staying focused. Such an important part of being a leader is making connections, and you can't do it if you're distracted. If you can train yourself to be in the moment, be present. I hear this time and time again from folks when I do trainings. People just aren't in the moment. They're working on their phone. They're doing three other things. Multitasking, is not a badge of honor anymore. That term was set up when computers came around. And sadly, we're not computers. And I'm glad we're not computers. But my point is, we don't do multitasking well. We can't be in two places at once. So making sure that when you're with your folks, you're with your folks. When you're with your team, you're with your team. And avoid getting distracted or sucked into social media with all of the other distractions and emails that we get in the workplace. And then lastly, setting boundaries. We need to, as leaders, put limits in place. We want to be friendly to our teams. We want to be warm to others, but we also need to know when we need to say no. And the power of being able to say no is to those things that are not important is that we can say yes to those important things. It's important that we're serious about our own work, our own passions, and we have those boundaries to maintain our own integrity of the goals and the things that we have to achieve as leaders too. So knowing that and being able to do that, don't overcommit, because when we overcommit many times we get frustrated because why did I do that? Why didn't I say no? I'm overwhelmed now. So taking care of yourself is so important also. Working well with others. And again, this is all about us, how we take care of ourselves. Many people will assume the worst of a situation or of a person. And I'm asking you to reframe that thinking. Assume the best. If one of your employees makes a mistake, let's not assume the worst. Let's not assume that they did this on purpose. We at times make negative assumptions on someone based on something they've said or done before. And then we find out that we're wrong. Or even if we haven't made it, don't have a history with that person, sometimes people will say or do something and we're making a negative assumption about that and we're reacting versus responding. And it's important to again reframe it. Think about why this person may be saying this to us. Is there something going on in their lives? Had something just changed? And also give them the benefit of the doubt and ask them, if you're assuming or you're thinking this is a negative thing that they're saying, ask them, what does this mean to you? Many times when there were a lot of changes in words, some of our folks would use a word to someone else and they would take offense to it. But in reality, that word, the meaning had changed. So asking people, what do you mean by that? Help me understand what you're trying to say. And assuming the best, that they're trying to be productive and trying to do the right thing. Keeping that open mind, we've talked about that. That's so important for us. As much as we can do to stay positive can be extremely helpful too as we work with others. And showing that appreciation. Folks, so many times appreciation costs us nothing. It's paying attention. It's being aware. It's thanking someone for just, even if it's a small thing, thanking them. I've had managers challenge me on recognition and appreciation. And they'll say, why do I have to appreciate someone? They're getting paid to do a job. And my response is always that our jobs are not easy. Our jobs are not getting any easier. And people do hard work. And sometimes just that little bit of appreciation motivates, it inspires them to continue to do good work and work hard. Um, we all know that. We feel it too, and we need it just as much as our coworkers do. And then, of course, as we work with others too, is to be on time. And sometimes people think, how does that impact an attitude? Well, if we set up a meeting, an appointment, if we're going to meet with someone, I always recommend be a little early. When people have to wait for you and you've set up a meeting or you're supposed to be at a meeting, sometimes people look at that as being disrespectful or they're not as important to you. And so when we role model being early, showing up, being fully present makes all the difference in the world. And we're showing people how to behave too when we do that. So attitudes are felt and heard. You've heard me talk about this already. Nonverbal communication can really deliver a message with a punch. And what's important for us as we communicate to our coworkers and to our employees is making sure that we get ourselves in check, especially if we're going to have a difficult conversation with someone. If I've got to talk to Sally again, and I've already talked to her about this, and she just makes me crazy, we've got to get ourselves in check, not only our attitudes in check, but also ourselves in check. Body language wise, you don't want to have that conversation with Sally at the end of the day when you haven't had lunch. You've already been there at work since 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're just really tired and not all there. Making sure that we get ourselves in the right place to have that conversation and having our body language mirror the message that we're delivering. And what I mean by that is if I'm expressing concern to Sally and I'm saying, Sally, I noticed your behavior yesterday. Is everything okay? I want to be able to do that in a tone of voice, a facial expression, my body language in a way that shows concern, not sarcasm, not frustration, not anger. So paying attention to that is so important. And if we don't have everything consistent with our words and our body language, people are only going to remember about 7% of what you're saying because the rest of the package, our face, our tone, our body language, is delivering a walloping punch. So being aware of that is incredibly important too. Receiving feedback, when you receive feedback too, when you think about your own attitude, be approachable, be open to it and listen to it. Just take that feedback in. It's hard to get feedback sometimes, and not everyone's skilled at providing feedback. So sometimes, even when they give us feedback with the best intentions, it's going to hit us maybe in the wrong way. But again, be mindful of it, listen, and ask questions, get clarification, and keep things in check, right? If it's something that, 5 years from now is not going to be that important, keep things in the right perspective and ask for feedback, check with others. And tell people if you get feedback from someone who may be not as skilled in giving feedback as you would like, just tell them, thank you for that feedback. I appreciate you taking the time. When people give you feedback, especially your leaders, it's because you're important, you're valued, and you matter. They see a future for you. When people stop giving you feedback, that's not always a good thing. And again, increase your positive thoughts, use your imagination. Lots of times that gets us in a better place. Look at those things that to be grateful for, things that we want to really appreciate in our life. Enjoy life. It's important that we look for those moments of joy. Yes, even at the workplace. And then again, these are all the benefits of a positive workplace, all the things that can be so helpful and so important to us because we spend so much time at work. And who doesn't want to have less stress in their life? Who doesn't want to have better health, more innovation, improved morale? We all want to have that. And building positive habits, making sure that we build those positive habits in our own lives too, because it makes that difference when we're paying attention to what's important. And it's been said, it's easier to start a new habit than to try to break an old one. So when we're finding that, gosh, maybe there's some things that are getting our day started off wrong and it's putting us in a bad place, how do we create a new habit so that we can go to work and feel good during work about the things that we are doing. I recommend a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. Well written, easy to read, and some great ideas on how to create those new habits so that we can feel better about the work that we're doing, our lives, and making the right choices. And then, of course, stop complaining. Again, checking ourselves, making sure that we come from a good place when we're interacting with people, and doing it in a way that is so important to build camaraderie and a good workplace in your organization, a good culture. And also know that your attitude is your superpower. And I do not kid around about this. People pay attention. Is this someone I want to work with? Is this someone I enjoy interacting with? It's contagious. Enthusiasm is motivational. And it does, for us, it creates resilience. And when we're going through a tough time, remind yourself, I've been through tough times before. I've had this happen before, and I'm still standing and I'm still doing pretty well. So many times our own self-talk is just as important as everything else that we do. And people will remember your attitude. They'll remember, I can work with this person anytime through any situation because they're consistent. They're about trying to make things happen, and they're really good and easy to work with. And think about joy for yourself too. What brings you joy at work? What's the best part of your day? Remind yourself, when are you at your best? When you have to have those tough conversations, do it when you're at your best, because you want to walk away from those conversations with your employees feeling proud that you handled it in just the right way. And stay curious. That keeps us going too. We always like to learn as human beings and as professionals. And maintaining a positive attitude, these are some things, and these are things you can share with your own teammates also. All of the things that we do, having a positive, giving positive feedback, gratitude, treating your team with kindness and empathy. Folks, empathy is the most important skill for leaders right now. Being able to look at things from that other person's point of view and taking that time to assist them when they are going through a tough time. And then again, don't join in the negative attitudes of others. Just don't get involved. Walk away if you have to. Guys, I don't need this today. I got too much to do. But making sure that people know that you're not going to stay in blame, the blame game, or in negativity for long. You're going to move forward. So a knowledge check for you, why does being positive matter? So as you take a look at these answers, teammates prefer being around a positive person. Positivity helps us be more creative. Positivity is linked to health benefits, or is it all of the above? I'll give you just a moment. Why does it matter? It is all of the above. Every single one of those is important when it comes to being positive. So a couple of things also for you: get out there and fail. Be human. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to take risks that are calculated risks, because when we do that, we allow others to do that too. We know that, hey, as a team, we're strong, we trust each other, and we have your back. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be so frightened that we can't take this risk because I'm going to look bad. Folks, every failure, most failures we've all had, have a purpose. They have a meaning, and they usually get us to a better place. And we always learn from them. And so a question for all of you moving forward, as you think about what I've covered today, what are some ways that you'll continue to develop a positive attitude at work and at life? Take a moment and feel free to jot those in the chat box too. And as promised, I mentioned I would leave time for questions, and I know Stephanie's been monitoring the chat box too. So what questions do you have that we can answer for you? Stephanie, do you have any questions that I need to answer that you've seen from the chats? Or it looks like there was a lot of good conversation.
Yes, there were a lot of great comments. I did not see any questions come through, so if I missed them, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. I will go ahead and wrap up our webinar here, so you have a few more minutes to ask questions and we can try to answer those live for you.
Yes.
All right, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. I know some of you here are looking for your continuing education credits, your HRCI or your SHRM codes. If you're looking for your HRCI code, it is 625249. If you are looking for your SHRM code, it is 23-33MN7. And it looks like we did just have a question come in, Jessica. Somebody asked, what if it is a supervisor or upper management?
So I'm assuming, I was looking at that chat and I saw the same thing too, Stephanie. So are we assuming that, I'm going to assume that it ties into that prior comment about being present, being fully present is what I'm assuming. And if you have someone that you're working with, and if they are in a leadership position above you, I would always make sure that when you're going to meet with them, especially on the important things, because you can't change anyone overnight. Some people just, they can't help themselves. They always have their phone, or they just, it happens. I get it. But if you have something really important, set an appointment and say, this is really important to me. I want to make sure that we have this time set aside because I really need to talk to you about something. Sometimes we have to make sure people understand, maybe not the gravity, but the seriousness of a situation, and you need them present. If you have people you work with, especially your own direct reports, many times, I've seen meetings where people have to put their phone in a basket before they come into a meeting, that we say we owe each other, everyone here, our full attention. Let's be present and call it out. Say, hey, I need everybody's best minds here today. Stay with me. So hopefully that's a little helpful. If not, feel free to ask, anything else is, even more specific to that. And I see a lot of great comments too. Here's a question from someone. What is the best way to approach an employee with an attitude that affects coworkers? What do I tell those coworkers when they complain? So when you're approaching an employee who has a bad attitude, again, you want to be, how would you feel if you were showing up in a way that maybe you weren't aware you were showing up horribly, right? You want someone to actually show some care and concern. I would ask somebody, and I'll use Stephanie as an example. Stephanie, I noticed that you've been coming in late, or I've noticed you've been snapping at people or being short with people. Is everything okay? I'm not picking on her. I'm talking about her behavior. And then listen to what Stephanie has to say, and that will guide your conversation. And part of that is, Stephanie, when you do this, it's affecting everybody else's schedule. It's affecting how they want to engage with you. And she's not aware of it. It's going to get her attention. And the second part of this question is, what do I tell those coworkers when they complain? What you want to tell your coworkers is you are going to address, you address all concerns they bring to you. And there's going to be times you're not going to go back with them with a report that I talked to Stephanie, right? I hold that confidence close, but they just need to know that you're addressing any concerns that any employees bring to you. And they may not know a final answer, and they're not entitled to it, because we owe every employee that confidentiality when we're coaching with them. Let's see, we have some more questions here, some on HRCI, which Stephanie has addressed. Is there anything else, folks, that you want to ask about yourselves, about attitudes, and about working with folks who have those attitudes? I see a lot of good comments about being present, being mindful. Yes, being fully present goes such a long way in showing up as a leader for those. Leadership's a privilege. It's not a right. We're not entitled to it. And it really sends a message to our folks when we're fully present and with them.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I see a couple more questions popping in, but before we get to those, if we could go to the survey slide, so we can have that available for people.
Sure, let me just do this real quick, and then I'll come back to your questions, I promise.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, we have a QR code on the slide for you. If you can snap a picture of that with your phone, you can fill out a few question survey for us. I promise it won't take you more than a minute or two to complete. We would love to get your feedback on this presentation. It helps us improve our events as we move forward, and it gives you another opportunity to ask questions if we don't get a chance to get to all of them today. So please go ahead and fill out that survey if you can, and I will pass it back over to you, Jessica, for more of these questions that keep rolling in.
Wonderful. Thank you, folks, for your questions, because I guarantee you they're going to help others on the in the session also. How do you handle negative attitude? How do you handle negative attitude with an introvert? So I'm going to assume that the person you're coaching, that you're working with, is an introvert, and maybe it's hard for them to express themselves or to be, to do exactly what you want them to do. So it's important, again, to talk about the behavior. So anyone, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, you can roll your eyes in a meeting, right? You're going to talk about the actual behavior. Stephanie, when you roll your eyes in a meeting, it really sends a message to the person who's talking in that meeting, and it makes other people feel uncomfortable, and it just brings the energy down in the room, and it distracts the presenter or the person who's talking. What's going on? So you just have the conversation, and remember getting yourself in the right place, because you may hear some crazy things from Stephanie that she's all over the place, but you want to stay calm. You want to stay professional. So starting that conversation, and again, based on what Stephanie tells you, you'll decide what direction you need to go. If Stephanie says to me, I don't care what you say, Jessica, I'm going to roll my eyes wherever I want. That's a whole other conversation. That's the will conversation. Stephanie's not going to improve. She doesn't want to improve. And that goes to the next question that we have here too. Should conversations be documented? If it's a one-off with Stephanie, she wasn't even aware that she did that. She was thinking about something else and just rolled her eyes, and it happened to be when someone else was talking. I would not document it. I would probably just say, be aware of it. Be aware of your body language, because Stephanie's a good employee. I mean, she's a great teammate for the most part. This is a one-off. If it's something that she continues to do, then yes, you're going to have to start documenting things. And that's where we can really help you. On your hotline, call us, use us. We can talk you through those situations, and our HR experts will help you to make the right call when you're working with your folks on situations like this. So we highly encourage you, give us a call. I have a question here. How to deal with employees that are going through life changes? It could be physical life changes. It can be emotional it can be other life changes that maybe aren't physical, but they're changing their lives. Again, having the conversation with them, talking with them. What resources does your company offer? What resources might you want to recommend? And again, use us, call us, because all situations are unique. And if you find yourself stuck with something, we can help you with that, and we're here to help you with that. I don't see any other questions.
I think you got to them all, Jessica, and we are coming up on time, so great job. If you have any other questions that come up, you can fill that in on the survey. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure also. Thank you so much, everyone.
Please have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you, everybody.